Hey all you groovy people. For the longest time, I wanted to do a Lex Luthor character essay, but I struggled to come up with something that's unique and interesting. To me, Lex Luthor is one of the most fascinating comic book characters of all time. Instead of wearing a fancy costume and getting his way through brute force, he oftentimes just uses his genius to get what he wants. In a way, he's a perfect villain for Superman. It doesn't matter if Lex is the CEO of LexCorp or the President of the United States. Superman just cannot rough him up. Superman just cannot attack a guy who's coming up with new and valuable innovations for society, no matter how faulty the guy is. For the longest time, I thought this was the reason why he's Superman's #1 villain. Boy, was I wrong. After thinking about Lex Luthor for a while, I came to the realization that Lex Luthor stood the test of time for an entirely different reason. In this video, I'm going to go over why Lex is one of the best characters of all time, and hopefully after watching this video, you'll have all of the tools you need to create a character that will live on for generations to come. But before we move on, please be sure to like and subscribe to Reverb Comics. You do not want to miss out on our awesome content. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to give you a brief rundown on the character's comic book history in case you're not familiar. What's interesting about Lex is that throughout the years, he had many different reasons to hate Superman. The Golden Age version of the character was depicted as a one-dimensional supervillain who mostly schemed for his own financial gains and for his own selfish ambitions. He pretty much just hated Superman because he would put a stop to his evil plans. The Silver Age version of the character actually started out as a fan of Superman. When he wasn't fangirling over the hero, he would be proving that he's the Earth's greatest scientist by trying to create artificial life. But due to his inexperience as a teenager, his experiment causes a fire in his lab. As a consequence, the Boy of Steel puts the fire out but accidentally destroys the life form and the years of research that led to its creation. Oh, and the fumes from the chemical fire cause Luthor's hair to fall out. As a consequence, Lex spends the rest of his life trying to take vengeance on Superman for destroying his work and causing his baldness. Now, things get pretty interesting with the character when we get to the post-Infinite Crisis continuity. In 1985, he was recharacterized more as an evil corporate executive with many underground criminal schemes. This guy is such a sociopath that he rigged his parents' cars so that they would die in a car crash. He later inherited his parents' life insurance and used it to create a better life for himself. The 2010 Luthor graphic novel by Brian Azzarello does a really great job of showing us why Lex hates Superman so much. In this series, Lex identifies as a humanist. In his opinion, Superman is problematic as he's holding back humanity's potential. With Superman solving everyone's problems, humanity cannot lift itself up and fight its own battles. Although his own hubris blinds him from the fact that he's jealous that Superman is getting all of the love and attention from the masses. What he really wants is for Superman to leave Earth so that humanity would be forced to rely on his own brilliance. A lot of the times in the comics, he justified trying to eliminate Superman through the absolute power corrupts absolutely argument. Which, hey, fair enough. There's not a lot of historical figures who can handle that much power. The Jesse Eisenberg version of the character in Batman v Superman used this line of thinking to justify his schemes against Superman.
God is all-powerful. He cannot be all good.
And the Lex Luthor from Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman series pretty much hated Superman for all of the same reasons. Although it's heavily implied that he has a deep inferiority complex when it comes to Superman. Hence, he's pretty much driven by his insecurities when it comes to taking down the Man of Steel. To sum up Lex, he uses his brilliance as a justification for his attacks on Superman, although his ego blinds him from the fact that he's jealous that the Man of Steel gets far more love and attention than he does. Now that we more or less know who this character is, let's dive into why Lex is one of the most significant characters of all time. Now, it might seem like I'm going on a tangent here, but bear with me. When I was trying to figure out what to say about Lex, I came across what the famous playwright David Mamet said about characterization. To David Mamet, there is no such thing as character. Now, when I first heard this, I was pretty surprised. He's been making successful projects for years like Oleana, Edmund, and Glengarry Glen Ross. So, for a really successful artist to say that there's no such thing as character is really surprising. To Mamet, the role of an actor and a magician are not too dissimilar. To him, the actor uses his or her own skills to present a character's dialogue in a way that sells the illusion of that character to the audience, which is a very interesting line of thinking. But it does raise a question. If there's no such thing as character, why should anyone pay attention to any character-driven stories? Well, let's go back to his work to answer that question. In Glengarry Glen Ross, there are a few characters that are used to communicate an idea, a set of values, or at least certain lines of thinking. Roma, for instance, doesn't really have any values. For him, business is business.
There's an absolute morality? Maybe. And then what? If you think there is, go ahead, be that thing. Bad people go to hell? I don't think so. You think that? Act that way. A hell exists on Earth? Yes. I won't live in it.
Now, there's a lot of ways to interpret what he just said there, but to me, it seems like the guy just lives for himself. Now, this might sound awful, but there's some truth to this. There are definitely a lot of people out there that are just out there for themselves and don't abide by any set of morals. What makes David Mamet so distinct from any other artist out there is that he's an author of truth. He uses the illusion of dialogue to communicate the truth of a moment and the character. Now, what does this have to do with Lex Luthor? Well, I'm glad you asked. To me, Lex is a character that's used to communicate the truth about humanity just as much as Clark does. What's fascinating about the human race is how it just does not change. A while ago, I read a book about Bernie Madoff. For those of you who don't know, Bernie Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme in US history. He basically just took other people's money to cover all of the losses that he was having in the stock and bond markets. He was just moving funds around in a way that made it look like he was doing well when he actually wasn't, which is not ethical or legal. As fate would have it, his Ponzi scheme fell apart when the 2008 recession came along, and as a consequence, many of his clients' lives ended up getting destroyed. Except for Kevin Bacon. For some reason, he says he's fine.
We kind of went, oh shit, let's, I don't know, have sex or something. I don't know.
Now, you would think that people would have learned from this, but nope. Over a decade later, Sam Bankman-Fried came along and ended up mismanaging his clients' funds by not maintaining a 1-to-1 asset ratio for his digital currency exchange, FTX. Instead of just putting their egos to the side, both men failed to be responsible and chose to destroy the financial well-being of their clients just so they can maintain a lavish lifestyle.
We can put that check in a money market mutual fund. Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
Now, why am I saying all this? Well, it's to point out that there will always be people like this in society. There will sadly always be people who exploit the well-being of the Commonwealth for their own personal gain. And guess what, folks? Lex Luthor communicates that truth about humanity to a T. Now, I do not want to leave you feeling hopeless. On the opposite side of that spectrum, Superman communicates a sort of truth about humanity as well. Despite how he has these godlike powers, he settled down, got a job, and lives a life of integrity. I know it might not sound real, but there are great people out there with a great set of values who create fantastic communities that give strangers a sense of belonging. The point I'm trying to make here is that Superman stories will always stand the test of time because even though they're very sci-fi-esque and fantastical, they communicate a sort of truth about humanity. It's going to remain relevant to every generation to come because there will always be ego-driven, self-serving maniacs like Lex and altruists like Superman who try to help out as much as they can. Whether we like to admit it or not, there will always be people like this in society. And this just so happens to be something that you should keep in mind when developing characters in your story. If a character doesn't embody some sort of ideal, philosophy, or line of thinking, that's a recipe for creating a character that's pretty forgettable. Take The Dark Knight as an example. It's very hard to ignore that movie. Even though people were wearing costumes and criminals were destroying all of these organizations, there were so many truths communicated through that film. Through The Dark Knight, I came to understand that any madman can take down powerful institutions, and societies need scapegoats and straight up lies in order to keep it functioning. And each of the main characters express some sort of truth. Many people are like Batman in the sense that they believe that each and every person has a purpose. Others are like the Joker in the sense that they've seen so much hypocrisy that they realize that everyone's values and morals is just one bad joke. And sadly, there are some people like Harvey in the sense that no matter how hard they try, they just cannot live up to everyone's expectations. In an odd way, The Dark Knight is way more real than a lot of non-comic book films out there. But anyways, back to my point about Lex. He'll always, in some way, shape, or form, be relevant to each generation. Lex Luthor is a greedy, selfish, and cruel person, but he's also an inescapable truth that we all need to figure out how to deal with. No matter how much technology and society improves, there will always be people like Lex. Don't believe me? Well, consider this. A study of stock trades by US senators in the 1990s found that they beat the market by about 12% a year. twice the advantage enjoyed by corporate insiders. Even though our society came a long way, we still have politicians undermining the faith of our institutions by trading on stock information that the public just cannot obtain. You're even being exploited by powerful CEOs as I speak. Big tech companies like Facebook, Google, and Amazon look and record your individual online habits and sell that information off to third parties so that they can target an advertisement directly to you on any big tech platforms. You'll probably come across an ad in this video that's specifically catered to you since YouTube is a part of Google. Without even realizing it, we let powerful CEOs invade our privacy just so they can become bigger and experience more financial gain. Now do you believe me? Whether we like to admit it or not, Lex Luthor is real. So if you want your story to have a lasting impact, make it real. But what do you think? Do you think this is why Lex Luthor has stood the test of time? What do you think makes this character so special? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe to Reverb Comics so that you do not miss out on our awesome content. Stay groovy.